Welcome to a special edition of Ripped from the Headlines and Sherlock Exposes, and we are the Watchmen Weekly. My name is R.C. Williams, co-publisher of both publications. And today, Julie Barrett from Conservative Ladies of America will be joining us in a moment to discuss this incredibly important topic. Let me just go ahead and pull this up on the screen. You guys know we rarely do this type of stuff, but published today. Today is Tuesday, March 24th, 2026. We dropped our piece on Sherlock Exposes Trojan Horse to the Max, the AI power grab behind child safety. So for those of you who watch the podcast or have watched us on Culture Crossroads, you know good and well that there's been a lot going on around AI. Now, on the TV show, we started talking about this late spring, early summer of 2024. At that point, we made the contention that if J.D. Vance was the vice presidential choice, that you would end up with Peter Thiel, Silicon Valley tech bro, broligarch, whatever you want to call him, and others in that space having an outsized influence on the White House technology and AI policy. We called it back then. You fast forward through, what did we see happen? We saw the push for a national framework and a moratorium on states being able to regulate AI. And this call for a national framework that was really kind of put together in a way that who was going to write the legislation? Well, it was going to be the Silicon Valley tech bros, right? It's much like a situation you'd be in with the Patriot Act. Who wrote the bill, right? The people who are going to make money off of it and ultimately control it. Who wrote Obamacare? Big Health wrote Obamacare, got everything they wanted. And in essence, what we ended up with is a tax where the bill has finally come due and people can't afford to pay it. So now we're in a place where earlier this year or late last year, we managed to stop the AI moratorium in the Senate. Marsha Blackburn actually was one of the people who led that charge. So it is odd to us that now President Trump has actually signed an executive order on a national AI framework. And late last week, the White House dropped what that framework looked like. At exactly the same time, Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee actually dropped her version of a bill. And so we want to make clear, because the headline on this, the Trojan Horse to the Max, we are 100% in the camp that we are advocates for child safety. But using it as a tool to wage the great gaslight on the American people will simply not be tolerated by this publication or anything that we do. So here's the deal. The White House drops their plan for AI, pretty suspect. Marsha Blackburn comes behind and then says, well, I'm going to put forward a 300-page bill that's going to lay all of this out. And the crux of it really is that we need to keep kids safe. And in order to do that, according to Blackburn's bill language, the only way to effectively do that is to make sure that we basically have the introduction of digital ID amongst all manner of other things to make sure that the children are safe. Now, look, like I said before, we are in the camp that we advocate 100% for child safety. This is not the way to do it. This ultimately leads to a Trojan horse situation where, one, you end up with a real ID. Two, it becomes impossible almost to have any anonymity or privacy on the internet. Three, you open up the door for all other manner of things. And like I said a moment ago, Julie Barrett's going to join us here shortly to talk more about this and her great piece through Conservative Ladies for America. So not only do you end up with that, but what we think is significantly more dangerous and something that we've been talking about for almost the last 2 years is that if you do something like this, including nuking Section 230, which ultimately is going to hurt small content creators in the long run, the other thing that you do that is incredibly dangerous is you're in a position where whatever framework you leave behind, look, Trump's got 2 more years, potentially, depending on how the midterms go, right? But let's just say he's got 2 years. Let's be hopeful, right? You're still going to have this thing churning forward. Who knows how much worse this will get, especially with someone like David Sachs as the AI czar in the White House. We have warned on him extensively. He is part of that broligarch system that is incredibly dangerous. The other thing that you get with this framework is that when administrations turn over, the pieces are in place to drop the hammer on folks like you and I and our businesses and any technology that we've ever built or anything that we've ever written. It is a double-edged sword. And this is incredibly dangerous, right? So going back a minute to David Sachs, we said, you've got wolves all over the hen house. They're at the front door, they're at the back door, they're inside making dinner. Guess what they're making for dinner? The hens, right? But ultimately, if something like this moves through, realistically, Who do you believe is going to write that legislation? Now, you would be correct if your answer behind the scenes is the tech bros. Absolutely. Because again, you got the Patriot Act from people in the defense industry who are going to make a ton of money off of it under the guise of safety and protecting you. It has done neither. Odd how those terms or those names for the bills never quite do what they say they're going to do. They actually do the opposite. And then you ended up with Obamacare, which is written by Big Health. So they got everything they wanted. They told you it was healthcare. They told you it was mandatory and it was going to be good for you. And it's turned out to be one of the biggest taxes and wealth extractions in the history of the United States. As you watch today, please keep this in mind. As you read our piece at SherlockExposes.com and Sherlock.substack.com, and you read Julie Barrett's piece, and you look at the other work that's being done by guys like Aaron Day, who are really digging into this thing, ask yourself the tough questions. Who is ultimately going to write this legislation? Why is the White House doing this? Why is Marsha Blackburn doing this? But most importantly, who is watching the watchers? Julie Barrett's going to join us next. This is a special joint edition of Sherlock Exposes, and we are the Watchmen Weekly. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back. R.C. Williams with Sherlock Exposes, and we are the Watchmen Weekly. Very excited to bring Julie Barrett onto the stage with us. Julie, welcome to the show. It is certainly great to have you. And again, thank you for your great work on the piece that you did. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite, and it's great to be here. And this is a huge issue right now and for the foreseeable future. So I'm glad that we can chat today and get the word out.
Yeah. So, Julie, let's give people a quick background on you and the great work you've done. And then I want to talk a bit about our piece, give context, and then I want to go to yours so that you can give people the rundown on everything that's happening. So please introduce yourself to the audience.
So I am Julie Barrett. I am a mother of four, first and foremost. I was never really involved in politics. I lived in Washington State for most of my life until 3 years ago. I started an organization there. Well, it started as a Facebook group. Kind of a long story. You can learn more about that at our website, conservativeladiesofamerica.com. So I'm just going to give you the overview here. But in 2021, when this Facebook group turned into a legitimate organization, we encountered Washington State's anti-parent laws when our 14-year-old daughter was in a mental health crisis, and an activist social worker helped her choose to go to a youth homeless shelter in Seattle. And that began a 2-3 years long number of crises in Washington State. And it connected me to a Republican Washington State legislator named Brad Clippert. And I really wanted to know how the laws were made that got us into this situation where my daughter could actually make this decision. And so I went down the rabbit hole on these policies. I've been in the rabbit hole ever since. In the 2022 legislative session, I started testifying on policy, and that became the mission of the organization. We are now a national organization, Conservative Ladies of America. My biggest thing is showing citizens what's going on in their government, making these policies make sense. Because, for me, I was just going about my daily life, raising my kids. I was a single mom of four for 10 years. So I wasn't really paying attention. And while we haven't been paying attention, I think we all realized during COVID that the government was very busy making laws that did not serve the people that they represent. And so that's really my big thing is public policy. We work on policy primarily at a state level across the country. And about 7 months ago, these tech policies that are pitched as a way to protect children and empower parents came across my radar. My number one priority in public policy is protecting kids and empowering parents. So I really started paying attention to this. And what I found right away is that these do not protect children, nor do they empower parents. And what they are is a de facto digital ID that's ushering in this enormous system of government surveillance, really handing big tech and the government an overwhelming amount of data, not just on kids, but on every citizen. And so I have really been trying to sound the alarm on these policies, and there's so many of them at a state level and a federal level. So it's great to see people picking up on this and being able to have a chance to chat with you and help educate your audience so that we can get people speaking out about these.
So, Julie, thank you for that. And I have our piece pulled up, and I'm actually at a point in the article where we referenced yours. And what I want to do here, I'm going to take a minute because I want to actually pull your piece up, and then I want to have you walk everyone through it here. So, give me just a second. I want to make sure. Let's do that, and then let's screen share. Let's go ahead. I'm going to put your piece up on the screen here, Julie, while you're talking. So, I mean, you really hit a gold mine here with these stories starting last week, and it was right around the time that the Trump administration threw out their framework. Same time, here comes Marsha Blackburn, who we thought was a hero,
Right.
stopping it a couple of months ago, kind of running the bill. So, talk to us about what you did in this piece on your Substack. Tell people what's going on.
So Marsha Blackburn introduced a 291-page bill. She's calling it the Trump Act, and it's got a number of different. It's not just AI. She's calling it the Trump AI Act, but it brings in several different policies that haven't really been very popular, such as Josh Hawley's GUARD Act, which is basically digital ID around AI chatbots. She pulled that in. She pulled in a repeal of Section 230. And there's a lot of regulations and guidelines in here that honestly, it's like from start to finish, it is just a very bad bill. I don't know how detailed you want to go into it here, but all of it, and Marsha Blackburn has been the kind of the champion of the COSA, Kids Online Safety Act, and so that's pulled into this as well, because there is now a lot of opposition to COSA for the digital ID that it sets up, and all of these different pieces that are included in this bill touch on different areas of technology. So you've got AI, you've got social media. Section 230 is really would take us away. There would no longer be an anonymous internet. You would have to we would see a lot of surveillance, censorship from big tech, because they would be responsible for the content that's on their platforms. So think back to like what we saw during COVID. If you talked, about vaccines or lockdowns or anything like that, we would see that at a massive scale. And, when you were talking before you brought me on, you mentioned that like Trump is in office now, but these policies outlive whoever is in office. So while the AI framework that the White House introduced on Friday is not legislation, it's not law, it's just their framework. If Marsha Blackburn's bill were to pass into law, that is law. And laws are very difficult to repeal, I would say nearly impossible to repeal. And so while Trump is in office right now and we think, well, Trump's a good guy, he's on our team, what happens if in 2028 we get a Gavin Newsom, right? Things are going to look very different. And so really this becomes an ID, a digital ID, simply to access the digital world, whether it's social media, downloading apps from the app stores. And there's even some, I forget if it's in this particular bill, I'm playing whack-a-mole with all of these bills, even some of these policies that touch on the OS level, right? So they're really getting down to that OS level. And we're also seeing some VPN bans. Arkansas was the first to do this. And then Wisconsin even has a bill that would ban VPNs. So this censorship and government surveillance is a huge issue with these.
So, Julie, I'm glad that you brought the last part up. It seems like we have this slow incremental creep. And what we told people when they tried to ram through the AI moratorium last year is that they're going to keep coming. Like, you can't say you've got a win. And the people that you think are your heroes for this thing, you mentioned Josh Hawley earlier, isn't it interesting that he jumped up and said, hey, this moratorium thing is terrible. Meanwhile, what he's trying to run is basically a variant of the same thing. I don't think people completely have their head around it. And one of our other concerns, Julie, because I want to get your take on this, and then I want to pose a question to you about how this could potentially go. So It has been our opinion for almost the last 2 years. You know, if you heard us at the top with my open, I said one of the dangers of J.D. Vance being the vice presidential candidate is that it came with huge strings connected to big tech and biotech and all of these other things. And we said, look, if he's the candidate, there's going to be a bill that has to be paid. So something's going to have to be done. And we jumped up and down and we said, we need to be very careful who gets appointed to some of these roles. And the thing that happened that really set us off is that David Sachs ended up being appointed the AI czar to the White House. So here we go with the wolves and the foxes in the hen house. Julie, in your opinion, based on what you've seen with this bill and some of the stuff that's going around, how much danger are we in when you have a guy like David Sachs or even Peter Thiel, who we believe has an outsized influence on this administration or others? How much danger are we actually in with these guys at the helm?
Oh, I think enormous danger. I think they are fully pulling the strings of all of these politicians. When you look at how these bills are being pushed by primarily by, they're bipartisan, but it's primarily Republicans have the leadership right now, and they're the ones that are pushing these bills through. We've got Republicans pushing these bills at a federal level, at a state level. We've got conservative think tanks and organizations and parental rights groups that are pushing this stuff. There's what we're seeing is a ton of big tech money behind all of these policies. For instance, the App Store Accountability Act is funded by Meta, right? And so they're astroturfing these organizations that look like they're, coalition of parent groups like the Digital Childhood Alliance. They say they have 150 parent groups. I they're being paid to bring these people in. These groups are getting paid to write op-eds and to show up in state legislatures and testify and say the talking points. And so, when I went to Tallahassee to testify on Florida's AI Bill of Rights in January, I spoke with Senator Leek, who was the chairman and the sponsor of the bill, after the committee hearing, and the look on his face, I still can't shake it to this day. The look on his face was just like utter defeat. And he said to me,
Hmm.
there's no stopping this bill. And it was like I was just looking at a man who is owned. And I think that is exactly what's going on here. And RC, think back to President Trump's inauguration. We have a picture of all the big tech people, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Elon,
Mm-hmm.
all of these people had a front row seat. And I think for us to think anything other than that they're pulling the strings is foolish.
So, Julie, it's funny you mentioned that last part because Juliana and I we talked about the fact it's almost like the Homer Simpson meme with these tech bros. They were liberals. They went in the bush. They came out as libertarians. Then they went back in, and now magically they're MAGA.
Right.
They're conservatives all of a sudden, and they're okay with all of this. And that was our thing. We're like, you guys are being snowed. And what we have long said is that if you can't be critical of an administration or someone who is a public servant, then why are we even doing the constitutional republic thing? There's no point if we're not going to hold people accountable. We said we don't care what side it
Right.
falls on. Our business with Sherlock is research and behavioral marketing. We're going to call balls and strikes because we have to. And we're like, look, you've got a gigantic Trojan horse here, and it feels good because you feel like your tribe is winning. And that's the ideal time for these people to try to ram these things through, right?
Absolutely. Yep. And I think that's exactly what they're doing. They've all sort of jumped on the Trump train. They're feeding Trump's ego, which, you know, he likes that. And he likes to feel like they're in his circle and that somehow he's got the influence over them. But they're the ones with the money. They're the ones with the platforms. They're the ones that are truly running the show. And I think that's really what we're seeing as, obviously there were tech policies before Trump came into office, but we
Sure.
really saw this escalate rapidly after Trump took office. And even his wife, the first lady, Melania Trump, has her own agenda on this. And if you watched the Melania Trump movie, which someone told me about it, so I fast forwarded to the part where she's talking on Zoom with Brigitte Macron about kids' online safety and how important it is that they age verify everybody that's online to make sure that they are protecting kids. So for people that think Trump is not okay with this, I would beg to differ. And I think his wife is, and I think he surely is as well.
So, Julie, and I'm so glad you laid out this detail. We'll make sure people have the Substack address and everything. They can see it on the screen now, the great piece that you did. And I've been scrolling through as we've been talking. So I'd like to get your take on something that we believe is entirely plausible, because we think we saw it shake out when they tried to pass the AI moratorium the first time. So let's say that Blackburn's bill kind of dies on the vine. In your opinion, what are the chances that they try to take this thing and ram it into something like the Save America Act, so it's in a must-pass situation, and then if you don't support it, you are un-American and racist and bigoted and whatever other words they use these days when you disagree with someone on logical terms? What do you think the chances are that if for some reason we're able to cut this off at the pass in its form today, that it gets bundled into something else where they try to force it through?
Oh, I think it's very possible. I don't think my prediction is that this particular bill won't pass on its own. I sort of feel like Blackburn is, because she's running for governor in Tennessee. So I think part of this
Right.
is like messaging campaign strategy for her. The Democrat base does not like age verification. You know, they've got the gamers, they've got the LGBTQ, and though that group is really opposed to this and they've really been vocal. And so the Democrats are starting to realize that if they support these policies, it's going to hurt them in the elections. So at least on the Senate side, I think it's going to be hard to get some of these passed. I was actually surprised that COPPA 2.0 passed the Senate unanimously, because that's all part of this.
Mhm.
But I think you're absolutely right. I think that's eventually what they're going to do. Even if we lose the midterms and the Democrats, have the leadership in going into 2029, I would see them doing this too, because it's not just Republicans that are owned by big tech. The Democrats are too. So one way or another, I think all of this stuff gets passed. And I think you're probably spot on that they'll hide it in something bigger.
So, Julie, before we let you go, I want to make sure that people have all the links for the great work that you've done and that you continue to do. And then how can people support you in the great work that you're doing?
Well, thank you very much for asking. Our website is conservativeladiesofamerica.com. You can donate on our website. The best place though to get, really breaking information is from our Substack. We send out Substacks several times a week, some almost daily. And that is conservativeladiesofamerica.substack.com. You can donate there as well. You can, also support us by upgrading to a paid subscription. We are completely grassroots. We are not paid, we don't have any big donors that pay us. And we're really just trying to get the truth out to the citizens. And to be able to do that, we do need the support of the people. So becoming a paid subscriber or making a donation is awesome and very much appreciated.
So, family, I hope that you heard that clearly, and you know our reputation. When someone comes on as a specialist who has done great work, we strongly encourage you to support them and us, because you're not going to get this level of work from people who are part of the agenda. So it is critical that we support each other. Julie Barrett, thank you so much for joining us on this special edition of Sherlock Exposes and the Watchman Brief.
Thank you for having me.